All right, I think we're good to go. Thank you all for coming out to my talk, Collaboration Lessons from 5 Famous Wizards. Real quick, just a little bit about me. I'm John Richards. I manage the developer advocacy team at Pantheon. And this is my first time out here in Rhode Island, but also kind of like New England, I realized. I grew up in Pennsylvania, but somehow never made it up past New York. So it has been awesome, and I love the campus out there. What a great place to have this event. Walking around yesterday, getting to check out the beautiful campus. And so I love cold weather, so this has been like a perfect event for me to be out there in my t-shirt, walking around. And yeah, it's been awesome here so far. All right, but today, this is what we're going to be talking about, collaboration. I'm going to look at this through the lens of 5 famous wizards. I mean, it's right there in the title, but first I want to give some caveats here at the very beginning. So I'm going to start off with what is a wizard. So for me, my definition of a wizard is inspired a little bit by one of my favorite games, Dungeons and Dragons. And so, a wizard for me is a gender-neutral term referring to some wise individual who practices magic. And usually they've learned that magic through some kind of dedicated study. They've worked hard to become intelligent and to practice magic. Now, I will clarify, this is not a list of the top 5 wizards out there. This is not trying to do that, but this is 5 that I thought worked really well to illustrate the points that I wanted to make around collaboration. And so hopefully that will help us today. And I should say, they illustrate really well how to collaborate or not to collaborate, as some of these illustrations may be. This is a little bit of a pop culture heavy talk, which maybe you assume that coming in. But if you've not heard of one of these wizards or one of these, either a book or a movie series maybe, no worries at all. I will be trying to make sure I give enough intro context to really set the stage here. And then I would love to hear about your favorite wizards afterwards, if you have them, to add to my wizard repertoire. And then I am going to start us off right now with a question, which is, how do you all feel about the idea of space wizards? So none of them made it into my list either way, but some people have strong opinions. Are the Jedi wizards, or is that something very different? So, show of hands, who thinks Jedi are wizards? Oh, we got one maybe out there. Okay, I'm not surprised. That's part of why they didn't make the list. It's definitely very different. But yeah, they were cut from the list for that reason. All right. So let's talk a little bit about collaboration. But I also want to say, why would we talk about collaborations? I mean, we're at a Drupal event. Who cares about collaboration? What does that have to do with websites? Well, you probably feel it has something to do with it because you showed up, so thank you for that. But this matters because of how we do our website operations. So if you think about the early web, I don't know about your experience, but I started out by building, my first web development experience was trying to build my own homepage. I remember trying to craft that page out of some HTML, being like CSS, so maybe I'll add a little bit. I'm a backend developer, so the CSS was a little superfluous. I just cared about getting some text on the page that people could move around. But I was building this homepage for myself, and it was a person of one, and that's all that mattered. Now, kind of my second stage as I started doing this was a friend or somebody saying, hey, could you think you could build a website for me? And now all of a sudden there were 2 people in there, and I had to know a little bit about what they wanted, and okay, well, let me see if I could build this website that somebody else wants. And then I got a career, joined an agency, and got a career in actually building websites. So now, for like the next 7 years of my life, I was building websites as part of a team. And we would have somebody come in and request a website, and I would work with our designer, and the 2 of us, they would design something very beautiful because, as again, I had no design skills. I would begin to build that out in raw PHP back then. I wasn't even using a CMS, and it was, okay, I'm going to build out something, and we've got this like ask, and I'm trying to make this happen, and now we're starting to see a team form. After that, I ended up moving over to a university, and in that case, and agencies definitely deal with kind of the same thing. But for me, when I moved over there from that small agency I was in to now being in a university setting, now I had content strategists who were part of the team. I started working with a project manager on our team. And then we were working with not like a single business coming in and having one stakeholder who was like point for their website. Now we would work with the like a whole department, and they would come in and there would be 5 people on their side of the table, 5 people on our side of the table, and we'd have these long drawn out conversations. And so we had moved from one person building a site for themselves, or I had, to now being in this spot of there's a whole bunch of people here at the table who are invested in the success of this project. And that things have progressed even further. Teams have developers, designers, content strategists, project managers. There's quality assurance getting added in. You have to deal with your DevOps, system admins on how your infrastructure is set up, IT, security operations. Then the marketers come in, maybe some business analysts. The social media manager wants some kind of integration to go with the website. And all of these people are now starting to make up these WebOps teams. And then you have all of the project stakeholders for the final thing of what it's going to be, who are saying, hey, you're building all of this for us. And it's just this giant committee starting to be involved in making these websites. As soon as we left building websites as our own personal home pages, we had to worry about collaboration. It became a vital skill in the success and the projects that we're trying to do. They're now a collaborative effort. So why did these things start to become more complicated? Well, the reason was, and so there's this proverb here, this African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And so not only were our teams evolving, but that was driven because the needs for what websites, what we were doing on the web started to evolve. Organizations found themselves needing websites that went further. The purpose of a website stopped being just like a little brochure on the web, and now people are running their primary point of business out of that. Maybe that's their point of sale. Maybe it's the primary driver of leads for them. But websites have moved from being just an extra thing you get, like maybe a business card, to now being where you actually do all the business, where all the work is happening. And so it takes a team, because we want to go farther. We had, let's just build these fast. You could throw up a simple single-page website really quickly, but when you started managing sites that were 1,000 pages, all of a sudden that became impossible. And so, as you all know, being in the Drupal ecosystem, CMSs, things like this started to come on board, and we started to see teams coming into this place. So, how can we learn from this? Well, we're going to go look at these 5 wizards now and kind of see what they have to say and what that can help us learn. So, our first wizard is perhaps the most well-known. I suspect most of you have heard of Gandalf. Now, even though he's probably the most famous, he is the only one on my list today who never officially studied magic. I am not the deepest in Tolkien lore. I've not read the Silmarillion, but my understanding, so there's a whole lore thing on how his powers came about, but he didn't necessarily go to a school and study. But I gave him a pass because he's famous, and also because he was definitely very wise, and he did study a lot afterwards. He knew a ton of different things. So what about him can we learn? And so one of the things that stands out to me, if you've read or watched The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, is that even though Gandalf is the most powerful person, he has all this magic possibility, but whenever they go to deal with the ring, who's going to carry this magic ring? We find out it's not the wizard, it's not even the mighty warriors, but it is the least physically imposing member of their group who takes up the most difficult challenge. As Gandalf says, he reminds us that help oft shall come from the hands of the weak when the wise falter. And so as we think about collaboration, the first lesson I want us to think about is the fact that collaboration is made stronger through diversity. Now, I want to make it clear that I gave that quote, but it's not that those who are diverse are weak. The reason I use that, the reason they might be called weak, is that as humans, we have a very natural tendency to evaluate others based on our own strengths rather than what their strengths are. And so we prioritize strengths differently, and then we could say, well, that person's weak in my area that I'm strong, without realizing that they have other strengths where we're weak. And so we need to make sure we're not using only our metrics to evaluate others. And so we think our way is wise until it fails. And that's why, in the example that Gandalf gives us, that the wise falter, and that's when the weak, we suddenly realize, oh, they had strengths we didn't. So top performing teams, they have a diverse set of roles, backgrounds, thought processes. You're looking for a team where each member is providing insight and skills that complement each other instead of just duplicating each other. If you're ever in a hiring role, this is super important as you start to think about who to bring on your team. There's discussion around culture fit versus values fits going on nowadays, but the idea is when you're hiring, make sure you're not just hiring copies of the exact same person, but instead you're starting to diversify that. You want people aligned to your values, but maybe not necessarily exactly to the culture. You want people who will push that a little bit so that you have a broader adoption of the kinds of people that you're working with, because when you're dealing with a project, that diverse array of perspectives can be huge on being able to approach it, not missing things, and not marginalizing other people. So how can we do this? So this is the part where I may be questioning you a little bit. So I was thinking about how do you embrace and encourage diversity on a team? And I feel that one of the first things is just being intentional about it. How are you out there looking? If you're not aware of this, it often can be passed by. So being intentional. And earlier today, Van Eaton gave a talk as one of the leaders of the Discover Drupal project. So I learned about that this weekend. It's a really amazing project where they are looking to try and bring in marginalized groups and bring them into more development roles, bring them into the Drupal community. And I love that the Drupal Association is being intentional here. Going out and saying, hey, we know we are made stronger by diversity. The future of our group is going to be better if we do this, so we're going to intentionally find ways to give sponsorships, to give ways for people to have the education needed and support to diversify the group there. So I love that idea, but I'll throw it out to you all here for a second. Any of you have you seen any great ways that organizations can really help embrace diversity?
Teach Drupal.
Yes. For those listening to the recording, we had somebody talking about teaching Drupal. It's a huge thing. Those of us who already know information, information itself is valuable. And if you don't have ways to share that, it can be a form of isolation for those out there. So being able to teach new people can really bring in new people to the group and can help bring them in, diversify your group because they've got a strength somewhere else that you can learn from while you're also teaching them the area that they're looking to grow in. So thank you for that. All right, let's move on to our wizard number 2. So in the Harry Potter books, Hermione is often referred to as the cleverest wizard of her time.
Which?
Yes, thank you. The cleverest witch of her time. For me, I mentioned in our intro that wizard is a gender-neutral term. No, I'm so glad you called it out, because when I wrote this down, I was like, this is not the exact quote, so I'm so glad somebody noticed. But yes, to me they're the same. We've seen what some of those other wizards did there, and Hermione definitely surpassed them as well. So, cleverest witch or wizard of her time, and one of the things I love about Hermione, but also made her sometimes maybe a little annoying, was she valued precision. At times, to that point of being annoying. But this was really important because if you think about the magical system in this world of Harry Potter and their universe, the magic needed to be precise. And early on, you may remember this if you've read the books or you've seen the movies, there's a spot where one of the other wizards is trying to cast a spell, and he keeps saying it wrong. And so eventually Hermione steps up and reminds him that it's Leviosa, not Leviosa. And so, it's a great point in her character, but her precision was really important. And the reason was, they needed that precision or it didn't work. She quickly was able to cast this spell. And so when I think about teams and collaborating, clear communication is absolutely vital for teams that are collaborating. I was in a really painful meeting once that I had to endure. This meeting lasted over 2 hours. We sat in there. It was the entire team. I think we had 12 people in the room. And we eventually called it after 2 hours, but people left and they were arguing in the hallways still about what was going on. What was this? This entire meeting was about what is the definition of done. And so we were trying to find that. We were trying to define the stages in our process, and that meeting came to a screeching halt the moment we said, what does done mean? So developers, myself included, we said, hey, as soon as we've built the feature, it's done. That's what it means to be done. I'm done working on it. I built it. It's over. Meanwhile, design said, well, hey, if it has not passed quality assurance, if there's not been a design review, this is clearly not done. It's going to have to go back. So done is not until that happens. And our project managers were saying, listen, until that gets shipped, until it's in the client's hand and they're okay with it, it's not done. And so we argued and fought over this for 2 hours, 2+ hours. But the key thing here is that that meeting made us realize that until we had that meeting, all of us had just been using the term done, but meaning very different things. So when the project manager asked me, is this done? He was meaning, is this ready for the client? Is it already out there? Is it shipped? And when I was saying, yes, it's done, I just meant I had pushed up a version of code that maybe had a couple bugs, but I had moved on to my next item on my task list. We meant very different things. And so clear communication is really important when you're working with other people. Because in our heads, when we say a word, we internally know what that means, but not everybody else does. So precision is vital here. So let's talk about some ways to have clear communication. So one of the things when I first joined Pantheon that I really appreciated was our documentation team had put together a document that they share out at every one of our company meetings. Because, if any new people are there. And this document is a list of all of our terms and acronyms that we use internally that new people don't know what they are. And so we're talking about, the SEs and the AMs, and we're talking about all these acronyms about what we're doing inside of our product, and nobody knows what those are until they get defined. And now we have this list of shared language, and it can begin to grow. And so by having that, we have a way to have some clear, precise meaning of what we're doing. Similarly, we might look at documenting our code. So, why were these choices made? What are we looking here for? And then another way I've seen for clear communication is taking notes at meetings and then sending that around afterwards and saying, hey, does this match what we had in this meeting? There's a reason that if you look at clubs out there, I was in Toastmasters for a while, they take meetings minutes, or if you're in a Rotary Club, or because if you don't, then when you meet again, you may forget what it is, but you also don't have a shared agreement of what was said. So having somebody who can say, hey, here's what we're doing, here's how we're aligned, can really help with this clear communication. Anyone want to throw out an example of clear communication you may have encountered?
User stories.
Oh, yes! So great suggestion here of user stories. I've only recently gotten into the user story side of things. Somebody sent me a document and they said, hey, here is what this user wants to do. And they're like, can you review this? And I was like, wow, this is the clearest I've ever seen expectations laid out. So thank you for that example. That's a really great one of a way to say, hey, here's clear expectations for what success looks like here. All right. Now we're on to wizard number 3. This is, I think, the most obscure wizard on my list, but maybe not. Maybe you've read Patrick Rothfuss's book, The Name of the Wind. Now, he's the most obscure, but he's actually the reason I made this whole talk was I was talking to a friend about Kavoth here, and the analogy came up, and they're like, you need to find a way you should share this in a session, and so then that was history. So, this is from the book, The Name of the Wind, but you don't really need to know this book if you haven't read it. Don't worry that it's obscure. What I want you to know is that in The Name of the Wind, this wizard Kavoth, and this is actually before he becomes really a wizard, he's just beginning to try and learn some magic. And he's talking to his mentor about how does magic work. And so to try and learn this, he's told that magic in their world relies on a very strong belief. And to do magic well, one has to be able to take 2 contradictory thoughts into their head at the same time. And so we have his mentor tells him, I want you to believe that this rock will fall and that the rock will not fall when I let go of it. And this line here has stuck with me, obviously, because I was using an analogy with a friend, because this idea of holding two separate beliefs in your head at the same time. So in attempting to make this rock float, Kavoth has to understand that rocks do fall when you let go of them, but he has to firmly believe that this rock, this time, will not fall. So lesson 3 is that doublethink, and by that I mean having two contradictory thoughts, holding two contradictory things at the same time, is the silent killer of collaboration. This, in my mind, is like evil magic. This is the necromancy of the world of collaboration. And why? So this creates a necromantic facsimile of a trusting environment, but it's dead inside. Eventually, you'll realize that this was just a skeleton clothed in truth's clothing, that all of your collaboration, all of your trust was a lie the entire time. So let me give you an example here. Many years ago, I was on a project, and we had this opportunity to partner with another team. And in our discussion with this department, we let them know, hey, we're all equal stakeholders in this project. We're going to work on this. It's going to be a collaborative effort. And we would form a governance team with them for us all to work on this project together. Now, what that team didn't know was that when we were talking about this, we were talking about the software layer. We were talking about the application we were going to build together. But we knew that we were not talking about the hardware layer, the infrastructure that all of this would be built on. And that alone is not a problem if it's clear. But the other team didn't know we had this bifurcation, if you will, of what was shared and what wasn't. They went in with the assumption that everything was shared, but we were only sharing really half of that. And this wasn't a problem for quite a while. We worked together really well. But occasionally, there would be something, we would make a choice. We would do something that aligned with our view of what we would need to do for the infrastructure, and we wouldn't consult them. And then they would feel left out. A little mistrust would build. We'd be like, don't worry about it, nope. We just made this change, don't worry. And this continued for a while and became a festering sore in there. And because it was never clearly told to them, they kept trying to come back, and then they would be disappointed when something like that would happen. And that great partnership that started there ended up falling apart. And now there's frustration, there's tension, and people are looking to say, how can we end this collaborative effort? Because now, when it's far too late, they've realized that this was not what they expected. They had thought they were getting this level of collaboration, but in reality, it was only a subset of that. And so this double think, and we believed the whole time that we were really collaborating, but only realizing afterwards we hadn't really shared the whole story. So double think destroyed many years of collaborative effort. So how can we avoid this? Now, one of the best ways to avoid double think is just don't do it. And I know that sounds a little easy, but there is a piece of a lot of double think in this case is a bit intentional. Hey, we want to do this, but what can we keep for ourselves? Maybe in our example. But trying to do this. So, don't do that. Don't be intentional about it. A second thing, though, that can happen is try to work in the open. I love how open source groups have giant conversations inside of Slack. And it's all documented there, or on post chains, where they're working in the open. And sometimes that's scary, because all that dirty laundry of open source gets exposed, and people are like, what just went down? But it's so much better than that happening behind closed doors, where nobody sees it, and it causing problems and schisms in the community. And avoiding mind games, just say what you're looking to do. We're adults. And so those are the things you should be looking at when you're trying to avoid doublethink. Anybody have any examples of doublethink you've run into or ways to avoid it? I know this one's a little bit of a stretch, but all right. Well, hopefully you may not think of examples of where you've run into this, where trust has fallen apart. So, but yes, avoiding that is incredibly important. All right. on to our wizard number 4 here. So this is Elphaba from the musical Wicked. I'm a big fan of this musical. And one thing about Elphaba, she may seem like an odd add to this list if you're familiar with her. She's not really the biggest team player out there. A little bit of a loner, but that's okay. A great wizard in her own right. But one thing about Elphaba, we can still learn from her. And so her story, if you're not familiar with this, this is a retelling of the Wizard of Oz story about the origins of the Wicked Witch. And so in this, you find out that, poor Elphaba eventually makes it to school, but finds out that she's looked down on for her green skin. She has to struggle to succeed, works hard, eventually makes it to this magical school, and then only learns, once she gets there, that wizards care far more about popularity than about the terrible plight that, in their world, these sentient animals are experiencing. And she begins to try and advocate for them and help them. And here we can see one of her friends lie to try and fit in with the crowd instead of helping with the problem. So she's become a public figure, and she has expectations about her. And so she's not willing to tell the truth in this instance. So lesson 4 that we have to realize is that we can't confuse popularity with collaboration. Now, they can look a lot alike. Cliques can really feel like a collaborative environment because they are a group of people that seem to be working together, but there's a key difference between a clique and true collaboration. And it's really built around this idea of acceptance. To me, this is an illusion magic of the collaboration world because it looks like collaboration right up until you begin to interact with that group. They're a group of people, they're getting together, they're doing things, but then you find out it's just an empty shell. Because cliques and popularity groups, this kind of thing, the status is built instead, is built by, a collaborative group has its status built by the members of the group. So it wants to constantly be bringing more people in because the group only gets better with the more people that are collaborating, that are working together. Like, how can we have these different point of views? But on the reverse side, when you have a clique, its strength, its status is defined by who is excluded from that group. Who can't come in and be a part of the group. And so instead of being focused outwards and on growing and on how to engage on something, instead this group is focused inwards about who they are and who they aren't going to allow in it. And so when we think about how do you build a collaborative effort and make sure that it's not a clique, what are you looking to do? And so a big thing in this space is going to be psychological safety. Are people safe to join? Are they safe to express themselves, to share their thoughts and opinions in this group? Or is this a group where everyone has to follow the leader, where you have to conform to some nomenclature so you can fit in here? And so a couple tips to kind of avoid whatever group you're in, kind of turning into this kind of a situation. So one of those that I've appreciated is this idea of like embracing awkward silence and just being quiet when you ask a question. As an extroverted person, I'm often the first one to raise my hand and want to talk and jump out there. But a lot of other people have different levels of comfort in that space. So one of the things we've done has been like, we're going to count till 5 or 7 and give a chance for people who want to take their time to come up with a question they might ask, or give a chance for somebody else to speak up in a situation who maybe doesn't. Like, don't dominate all the conversation, which I say as I'm up here presenting and dominating the conversation. But hey, that's a different thing. So embracing the awkward silence can be a powerful tool to allow other people to contribute. I also find it's really helpful to find ways to give folks an opportunity to work with their preferred method. If you're in an environment where everybody, like the only way we're going to brainstorm, the only way we're going to collaborate is coming together in a meeting and everybody just shares their thoughts right there. And I have some great friends who that's not a great collaborative experience for them. They would much rather hear what the goal is, step away, have 30 minutes of their own time to to think on this and then come back with ideas that are going to be better than the spitball ideas I was throwing out. But because we didn't have that opportunity, those can get missed. So how can you make sure you have opportunities for people to engage in that way? Another thing is look at your group and say, what is the core motivation of this specific group? That can be a clear indicator. If the group is focused on others, on solving a problem, that's often a collaborative group. But if the group is focused inwardly on what is good for us, what is our status, like who are we, that's when you're saying, oh, no, the purpose of this group has been changed. It's no longer collaborative. It's turning into this clique. And then just look to say, is this group looking to bring in new people, or is it trying to find ways to keep others from joining in? All right. Number 5 here. Oh yes, and I have a prop. Thank you. Shout out to our good friends at Mythic. Yes! Is one of my favorite wizards, Twilight Sparkle from the show My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic. She is a wizard who really starts out, she's a magical unicorn, and she has to she moved to this town full of other ponies, and she really, like a lot of wizards out there, prefers to be alone, reading books, studying magic, but she gets eventually told she has to interact with this community, and what she begins to find out is that, hey, she can't live her life alone, even as a powerful wizard that she is. She needs some friends as well, and it culminates in this important realization that we've learned that friendship isn't always easy, but there's no doubt it's worth fighting for. And so, point number 5 that we learned is that collaboration really is magic. Collaborative teams outperform dysfunctional teams, but it's also important to know they outperform lone wolves as well. At Pantheon, one of our values is called teamwork, and we define that as no lone wolves. And the goal, back to that earlier quote, isn't to be the fastest, it's to go the furthest. That's why we need these teams. And I don't want you to just take my word for it. So I've got some research here from Dr. Gardner of the Harvard Business Review. She studied law firms and how they collaborated. And so what were the findings? For a firm, the financial benefits of multidisciplinary collaboration are unambiguous. Simply put, the more disciplines that are involved in a client engagement, the greater the annual average revenue the client generates. My research clearly shows that professionals who contribute to colleagues' client work sell more services to their own clients. And so, at the end of the day, collaborating isn't just helpful for others, but it helps you to be a better person to work with, and you're going to see better results as you become a collaborator working with other people. So how do you do this? I mean, the first step is inviting other people in to collaborate. How can you bring other people in? And one thing I found is, we for a while had in our team meeting, who here wants to collaborate? And we had a lot of people raise their hands, but then nothing happened from it. And so what we found was that instead of coming to the team and saying, who wants to collaborate, everybody had a desire to do it, but we had more collaboration than we had tasks that needed collaboration. So we said, let's change this part of our meeting to be, come and bring something you would like to have somebody collaborate on with you. And so that changed that meeting. So now there was a clear ask, and it was, hey, I'm working on a presentation. Can anybody review this for me? Oh, I've got this newsletter that needs to go out. Can I get some help here? I'm coding this document, this application, and I'm stuck at this spot. Can somebody come work on this with me? So having a clear ask is much better. And if you're looking for feedback, the more you could say, hey, can I get X kind of feedback? Letting people know what you're looking for feedback on is helpful. Because I know when I'm just asked to give me feedback in general, I can be like, well, I don't know what they're looking for. And if it's only halfway through, maybe I'm pointing out things they already know. So being clear in what you're expecting from your collaborators is super helpful. Another thing is, you don't always have to look for collaborators for yourself. Be listening out there. Where do you hear somebody doing one thing and be like, hey, I know somebody else working on something similar. Maybe I can connect these two people together. So finding ways to set up other people to collaborate beyond just yourself. And then finding a shared goal and working towards it. One of my favorite groups where I work at, it's one of the only meetings that I go to on a regular basis that I'm so excited to go to. So we have this meeting called Open Sorcery. open to anybody at our company, and it's just people who care about open source. And we come in there, we have kind of a loose agenda that we run, but we just talk about like, how can we be a part of this? What are we doing? How terrifying is PHP 8 coming down the line? What are we going to do about end of life coming for Drupal 7? Like all these different questions. But everybody is in there, and it doesn't matter whether you're in marketing or whether you're in a developer or engineer on the team or someone else. People just come together and we kind of share what we're doing, what those experiences are, and it's incredibly collaborative. And so just having a space that says, hey, here is a spot for people to come share ideas, to talk about what they're doing, can be really helpful to driving collaboration. All right, so we ran through 5 different lessons on collaboration. But I also want to share, so here's the 5 things we talked about. 1, collaboration is made stronger by diversity. That we want to make sure we have clear communication. That's incredibly important. That we want to avoid this idea of double think, like making sure that when we are collaborating, we're bringing our full selves, that we're engaged, and we're not holding part back, that we're not planning something else. And we don't want to confuse popularity as being actual collaboration. It's a very different thing. And then lastly, that collaboration actually makes all of us perform better, and we get more value that way. Now, to this, I want to share that these are great, or hopefully helpful tips, but collaboration is really more of a mindset than just a list of tips. It's an outlook. And it's about valuing the team over specifically the individual, especially that individual that is me, myself. And so I'm sad to admit, but it took me many years to really learn this. I was working on this project, and it failed spectacularly. And I knew it was going to fail. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but trouble and problems, they all roll down the mountain to the people who are at the bottom. And in a classic waterfall development approach, it's usually the developers who are at the bottom after all the content strategy's ready, all the design's been built out, and now it's kind of to the developers. So we always felt like we're at the end, and so I saw this project was going astray, and I said, you know what, I'm going to go document all the ways that I held up my end so I could prove it's not my fault. So we get to the end of the project, it doesn't meet its deadline, we're way past, we're over budget. And so I go into my manager and I have all this documentation prepared. And so I start reading off and saying, hey, here's where content messed up. Here's where design messed up. This is what pushed our line. Here's how the developers did what they were supposed to. We're all good. And I expect to be lauded for this to show hey, we were doing our best. But my manager was so unhappy with me. And he told me, John, you're not off the hook. I believe it wasn't your fault that this project failed, but you saw that there were problems and you didn't tell anybody. And so you're responsible because you're part of this team. You could have said something, you could have done something, but instead you started documenting, you started showing it wasn't your fault, but you didn't raise those concerns. And it was then I realized that I was really working with that lone wolf mindset. I cared about myself, my performance, and something had to change. In the book Tribal Leadership, one of my favorite books about collaboration and teamwork, they define this moment as realizing that the ego hit of accomplishment isn't the same as success itself. I had really been craving that ego hit. I was showing I had accomplished what the developers were supposed to. I'd done it in time, but we still hadn't succeeded. I had missed that success was really what I should be driving for. And so I want to just challenge you today as you think about being a collaborator and working with other people to crave success, not accomplishment. And then you'll unlock the magic of collaboration. All right, thank you all very much. We've got a few minutes left. Any questions? All right, well, lunch is over in the building it was yesterday, so go get some food, enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you around. Thank you all.
Thanks.